Hey, do you like what we're doing here at Light Pollution News? For the price of a coffee, you can help ensure that this show continues to bring you all the latest updates by becoming a monthly supporter. Monthly supporters help us pay to offset the cost of producing this podcast. For more information, go to lightpollutionnews.com/supporter.
Hey there, home. Light Pollution News, Episode 4, Neighborhood Looks Like a Truck Stop. In today's episode, do you want your neighborhood lit up like a truck stop? Well, Pompano Beach, Florida might be the place for you. They're out to do just that. Pregnant women, keep those lights off before bed. Lights before bed could increase your chances for gestational diabetes. New year, same Audubon-inspired Lights Out program beginning this spring. Plus, does light truly affect birds? The answer is yes. Learn more by staying put. A new Smithsonian exhibit aims to shed light on our relationship with the night. And wow, do we have an Afraid of the Dark segment for you. We have Daylon Burt of the Astroscape YouTube channel and Brendan Happe of the Philadelphia Movement joining us today for a great panel discussion. All that and more on this month's Light Pollution News. Get ready, a new LPN begins now. Welcome to another episode of Light Pollution News Podcast, the place where you hear about all of the news related to the environmental plight that is light pollution. I'm your host, Bill McGeaney. As a reminder, you can read all these articles and more by visiting our website at lightpollutionnews.com. The article listing for the show and all shows can be found on Reddit at our Reddit at r-light pollution news. Today we have two outstanding co-hosts to fill out the panel of this show. You do not want to miss this one. It's an all Pennsylvania crew. I'm joined by the Astro outreach extraordinaire, a true through Philadelphia Moon man, Brendan Happe. Learn about Astro science outreach possibilities by following Brendan over at his website, philadelphiamoonmen.org. Brendan, how are you doing? It's nice to meet you, buddy.
Yeah, doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Do you want to say a few things about the Philadelphia Movement?
Yeah, so you can find us on South Street on any clear night, South Street, downtown Philadelphia, usually between 6th and 5th. But this month we'll be offering views of Venus and the moon and maybe some of Orion's nebula while we still have a chance.
You're able to get that down on South Street.
We can, yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a smudge, but totally possible.
Well, that's great. South Street's really been lit up as of late, so I'm pretty impressed with that. That's good to hear. And for those of you not from the Philadelphia area, South Street it's kind of like the bridge between South Philly and Center City. So it's a main commerce area. A lot of people live around there, residential commerce, interesting shops, right? There's always something unique you can find on South Street, interesting people. Okay, hail from the other side of the state, from the Steel City, the city of yellow bridges, right? They're all still yellow, right, Brent or Daylon? Is Daylon Burt. Need help configuring or setting up your astrophotography gear? Well, Daylon is definitely your guy. Daylon, I just recommended your YouTube for a walkthrough on how to set up a Skywatcher Star Adventurer. I have a friend of mine who's a budding astrophotographer. She actually reached out, took my Star Adventurer, and wouldn't you know it, right at the same time you had just released this great little explanation, this walkthrough on how to set it up. So I didn't feel like I had to really walk her through it. It's great. So Daylon, welcome to the show.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm glad that one of my videos could help somebody out that you know.
Yeah. You got some great little walkthroughs over there. I know I used it when I was setting up my ASI Air. That was phenomenal. And they're not overly detailed, but they're detailed just enough. So you really don't have to sift through a lot of crap. Like, you get everything you need, and it answers some of those weird questions, because every single one of these pieces of equipment has questions that just boggle your mind at some point, right?
There's always a perk to some piece of equipment or the software when editing and all that stuff. So, as long as I give something that helps somebody out, I'm happy with that.
Also, not long ago, I know that someone told me Pittsburgh had the second most bridges in the world, second highest density of bridges to like Venice. Is that really true? I'm just curious. Just now that I'm talking to a Yinzer, I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. We're pretty much up there on the list. So there's a few others in Europe that are on us, but yeah, Pittsburgh's up the top of the list.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining me on another episode of Light Pollution News, the show where we shed light only where it's needed. Each month we bring to you only the top articles of light pollution from around the globe. This month we have a episode that is relatively thick, and it seems to focus mostly in Florida. So who would have thought about that? But hey, let's kick it off. Let's go to South Florida. It's a nice time of year to go down there anyway. Not too hot yet. Residents petition forces city to revise Munster street lighting upgrades. This comes us to from Kristen Hernandez of the New Pelican. And down in the town of Pompano Beach, Florida, a new street lighting plan designed to provide sufficient coverage to Cynthia Corbett Elder and her fellow neighbors of the 23 through 2500 block of Northeast 15 Terrace. The proposal showed that residents included an overhead fixture placed at the height of 17.5 feet and extended out over the street with a decorative arm utilizing a lighting fixture known as a Memphis holophane. The Memphis holophane pictured in the article is essentially a teardrop fixture that aims downward with what appears to be a limited no-glass outcrop lighting portion of the fixture. So that would mean that there is no actual piece of the light that is sticking out and going horizontal out of the fixture. Per the article, streetlights are a source of light pollution, which can have serious environmental consequences for humans, wildlife, and our climate, and prohibits the view of the beautiful night sky, Corbett Elder said. Instead of those pretty 17.5 decorative poles featured in the brochures, the city gave the small residential streets in Fairway Heights giant 30-foot Munster light poles. And no kidding, from the pictures in the article, these poles appear to make the neighborhood look like a truck stop. The fixtures that some of the residents received instead ended up being 30 feet in height, were fully unshielded, 4,000 LED acorns. The light itself looks very, very bright. City Clerk Kervin Alfred countered that the cost to implement the initial program appeared to be a serious factor. Per Alfred, the design, including the smaller 17.5 poles, would have required many, many more poles. After a period of going back and forth, Pompano Beach agreed to remove only one of the 8 poles and offered to install a lighting shield as need be for Corbett Elder. Were Corbett Elder and the residents of Fairway Heights hoodwinked? For those of you not aware, Pompano Beach sits about 35 miles south of our late great President Trump's Southern Oval Office out in Mar-a-Lago. So that's my question, you guys. Is this community, were these residents sold a pack of lies? Go ahead, Brendan.
Well, surprisingly enough, I actually just spent the past 3 weeks in Fort Lauderdale. And I was really excited because I was thinking I'm going to be at the ocean. I'm going to have a great view of the night sky. And it was probably even brighter than it is here in Philadelphia. Wow. And I know the humidity plays a factor. So these people are already getting, more than enough light. But I absolutely think this community was hoodwinked, as you say. But it's a confusing story. Like, where is this incentive coming from to just give people way more light than they need or what they're even asking for?
Daylon, you had mentioned something that you believe that the vendor had played a role in this.
Yeah, so I think that when they were talking to the vendors were promising one product, but they didn't deliver on what they were getting. And yeah, it makes me feel like they were duped a little bit, that whatever was signed in the contract, they didn't get what they were asking for.
Oh, interesting. So you think the vendor actually sold them a pack of lies and then wasn't able to deliver, or they may have miscommunicated somehow with the actual engineers in the town?
I would think it would have been a form of miscommunication. Yes. I wouldn't say that it would be intentional.
Right.
I don't.
Yeah. I understand what you're
I'm not speaking for the vendor. I guess I'll say that.
Let me ask this question. Does that happen often? Do you come across a lot of that?
I wouldn't think that would be something that happens often, but one of the things with vendors that I do see working with IDA Pittsburgh and looking around is that whatever's available is what you're going to get. And there are some fixtures that are becoming more and more dark sky friendly, but right now there's still a ton of fixtures out there that are not dark sky friendly. And that's what the vendors are putting out and people are buying. So if we were to go with a little bit more dark sky friendly fixtures, move away from the unshielded acorns and stuff like that, we wouldn't have problems such as this.
Right. The town is in a bind. The town needs to light up these streets. And they're in a contractual agreement with these vendors that they don't have what they anticipated coming through, and they're just using what they have.
Right.
Let's continue on with some of the Florida stories here, since Florida is the news. We have LED streetlights are energy efficient, but are they environmentally friendly? Well, it's complicated, and this comes to us from WLRN 91.3 in Boca Raton, Yvonne Bertucci Zoom Tobel. This is a pretty important article, and it kind of filters through on some of the issues I think that we're talking about here. Maybe you'll agree with me. Up the street from Pompano Beach, about a half an hour sits Boca Raton. And like Pompano Beach, Boca Raton is currently trying to switch over all of their high-pressure sodiums to LEDs. The state of Florida caps LED temperatures at 3,000 per the American Medical Association recommendation. So that's for highways or any state-owned road. However, this rule exempts municipalities who do not need to follow the state's guidance, which these municipalities may routinely install lights anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 K in temperature or more so, to your point, Brendan. Boca Raton, like many beaches of the Florida towns, utilizes sea turtle-friendly lighting along the coast, which includes warmer temperatures, which are around in the 2000s. And I know we just came back from Pensacola, where you have on Navarre Beach and Pensacola Beach, you have these warm lights right on the beach side. This means that the community will require additional low-temperature LED fixtures that cost an estimated double in price of the 4,000 K temperature lights. The new bright and bluer lights in Boca Raton exceed both the AMA temperature recommendations of 3,000, and by consequence, they will exceed the lower International Dark Sky recommendation of 2,200. In a rush to convert away from the high-pressure sodium lights, neighboring community members, such as one who lives in Montana town, convinced their leaders to switch away from initial plans to put in 4,000 K LED lights to a more reasonable 3,000 K, following an extensive educational push for their town supervisors. This blurb doesn't do the article justice. However, I implore you to take a look and read through the full piece by Bertucci Zumtobel. Like all articles featured on the show, you can find it over at Light Pollution News. So, Brendan, when you were down in Fort Lauderdale, did you guys have coastal lighting that was different from the actual town's light?
Coastal is in the coast itself, like the beach.
The physical coast, the beach. Yep.
They kept the physical coast pretty dark.
Right.
It's just the hotel lights that would illuminate the beach. But I did notice like a yellow glow. I think most of their street lighting along the coast is not very blue.
And that's the same thing I experienced up in northern Florida. I think they do that for the ecology, really for sea turtles to maintain that color. But once you get on the interior, all bets are off. Daylon, I think you are very passionate about temperature of lights. This is an interesting thing that I think a lot of towns are dealing with.
Okay, yeah, for color temperature, it is something that is very important. I think it's kind of a shame that Florida does allow some exceptions like that, where one municipality can just say, nah, we're not going to follow that. I do think that's a little bit of a problem. But I do give props to Lantana Town. switching back down to 3000 Kelvin, it's a little bit more reasonable. I would still say push for 2200 wherever you can. But then they can also mitigate some of it by putting on some motion sensors and dimmers for when the lighting isn't needed as much. With the way LEDs are these days, you can control them a lot easier than a high pressure sodium.
Yeah, I think the main issue here is cost, though. When you're looking at some of those fixtures, specialized fixtures are double the price. That was listed, I believe the normal price of 4000K was 4 to 5, maybe K per, I have to look in the article itself, but it was 4 to 5. It was a ratio of 2 to 1 for a specialized fixture versus a 4000K fixture. So obviously that's going to play a role in here. How do you convince taxpayers that this is worth the extra bump in cost?
Well, one thing, I guess the upfront cost is a little bit high, but then the maintenance running costs, the need to block off traffic to get up on that pole and work on it will go down over time. These lights last a lot longer and you don't need to maintain them as much. So, everybody gets a little bit aggravated at some closures on the roads. Well, if they're up there working on a pole, have them put in new lights, they're not going to have to touch it again for almost 8 to 9 years. Maybe you'll get the occasional dud bulb that they have to replace, but that's about it.
And it won't turn blue or green, or I'm sorry, purple. It won't turn purple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brendan.
Yeah. So, the monetary incentive is certainly there, but it's a tricky thing to get people on board when it comes to actually doing something about light pollution, which is kind of what I'm involved with when it comes to sidewalk astronomy. It gives the average person an opportunity to be reminded that the cosmos are still there, is still there, and we're still living in a universe, and we might have lost our place in the universe, but I finish every interaction about light pollution with the good news is we can turn the lights off. And I think that's, I like to take it on the existential path rather than the science of it all. And I think that's a decent angle when it comes to getting everyone invested in these solutions.
Rounding out our policy news, we have one more article where Washington's House has voted 94 to 1 to limit light pollution from wind energy farms, from Annette Carey over at the Tri-City Herald. In Washington, a relatively cheap lighting solution is becoming policy. The Horse Heaven Clean Energy Center will now be required to install radar detecting systems, which turn on blinking red lights only when a low-flying plane approaches the windmill. In Eastern Washington, we don't always have a say where the energy is sited, but we do want to take good care of our landscape and our hillsides. And that's Republican Representative April Connors. The Horse Heaven Hills plan to install upwards of 244 wind turbines.
Yeah, I like that they're doing some form of, I guess, with the radar detecting on the windmills. It's kind of like motion sensors for the ground, but those lights don't need to be on if nothing's flying over it.
Exactly. So that's something I first heard about taking place in Germany, but it seems to become, I think it's coming here in the States at the federal level, and that's why you're starting to see communities adopt it.
Now, I wonder what with the radar, how many nautical miles are going to be going out, aeronautical or whatever the term is. Are they going to have to be within 10 miles? Are they going to have to be 5 miles, 20 miles for those lights to turn on? Because if you're just kind of flying by, but you're 30 miles away, I don't think that really needs to come on. But if you're definitely going to be getting close, then, within 5 miles or so, it'd be a good idea to let the pilot know something's there.
Yeah, and this is taking place in Eastern Washington. Have you guys ever gone out to Eastern Washington?
Have not.
Haven't.
Yeah, it's pretty much all farmland, right? It's all it's arid farmland. So it's kind of nice too that the community out there wants to kind of preserve the feel, right? You'll have developers come in and try and put in energy installations. They still want to have a little bit of control over how they see their area, how they see their community.
Well, I agree with that. That's Maine does similar stuff with infrastructure to where they try to preserve the feel of the state as more wilderness than populated. So, yeah, I can understand where they're coming from.
Brendan, you have any thoughts on any of these articles? Or
yeah, it's a really important piece of environmentalism. I'd love for light pollution to be like a bigger part of that general conversation, and that's what this windmill technology is. Makes me confident that we're actually headed there.
Yeah, I think about having these offshore, right? You think about building windmills offshore and then having the lights that kind of pull birds out. So having it only light up based on any kind of aeronautical issue sounds like a win-win for everyone in this.
Yeah, a total no-brainer, if you ask me.
Agreed.
So that's it in the way of the policy world this month, folks. Just a second, we'll switch over to our health and science articles. First, however, I'm curious about what you two gentlemen are working on these days. Is there anything new come down the pipes for Moonmen or Astro Escape?
So we've got the same old classic sidewalk astronomy in downtown Philadelphia. We'll always be posting pop-up locations on Instagram at Philly Moonmen. And I've been working with some members of the rec coordinators for our city parks, hopefully to bring some family-friendly programming for all ages. It's funny you mentioned the DVAA before we started the recording. I had developed this programming with a different DVAA, the Da Vinci Art Alliance, where we offer a live view of the moon on a TV screen, and we have a member of the collective, Eddie Reynolds, teach everyone how to draw the moon and the craters and the shadows and all that. So that's one of the things I'm most excited to get started back.
Wow, that's really cool. So where did that take place at? Was that outside?
We were doing that at Hawthorne Park in Bella Vista.
Very cool.
But I'll have more information about that soon.
Brendan, do you ever work with Derek Pitts?
Well, the only opportunity I've had was we were working with him for the citywide Star Party. But the first one the Philly Moonmen got on board with was supposed to be in 2020. And as I understand now, there's no plans to get that going. So it might be up to us to organize something like that, because the Franklin Institute is nowhere to be found these days.
Okay, well, at least it's not just me with not hearing anything from the Franklin Institute. Daylon, what is up in Astro Escape? I know you always have something in the pipe.
So yeah, I do have stuff coming up. One, I'm not going too far into detail, but I found that there is a cool handheld gaming device that you can actually use to control your Astro gear and do a little bit of processing. So when I put that video out, you'll be a little bit baffled, but it's kind of cool. But
is that something you stumbled across, or is that something you decided you wanted to just take on the challenge and see if it'll work?
I stumbled across it.
Oh, wow.
I just found out that a few things were available already on this device, and I was like, well, how far can this go? So you'll have to stay tuned to find out about that. But another one that's coming up that is going to be my International Dark Sky Week video, and it is all about turning all of your devices red. So your phone, your computer, everything. With astrophotography, there's a lot of technology that controls it. You need a screen to see what's going on. So one of the videos coming up will be how to change your screen to dark red and preserve your night vision while you're out there and preserve the night vision of others around you. And this will be for all OSs and all mobile devices.
So triple click and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And for those of you at home who aren't aware of triple click, you can set up your iPhone to use an accessibility function that will click over to a red view. It's pretty great that we have red light devices these days, because back in 2010, you had to cover it up, or you had to kind of get some film to put over top of your devices. But now you just hit a switch.
Yeah, now you can just hit a switch. And there are a few other tweaks you can do in, say, Windows and Mac and all that to make sure that you're still able to read everything on the screen. So, but it is nice and dim. You're not blinding your neighbor when you're controlling your Astro gear if you're at a star party. So it'll be a helpful video, I hope.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. For those of you at home, International Dark Sky Week is the Earth Day week. So that's a week leading up to Earth Day. I think that's the week leading up to Earth Day.
It starts the weekend of Neef, so yep. It starts the April 15th and goes to the following weekend.
Are you going to set up a Neef? Are you going to have anything set up there?
I will be vlogging Neef.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Well, definitely, folks, pay attention to Astro Escape and learn about some new gear if you're looking to waste all of your money, hard-earned money. Daylon will be having you drilling over what's up there. That's good.
Yeah, I'll be tuning into that.
All right, moving on with the articles. In the health side of the news, pregnant women are advised to dim lights before bed to reduce diabetes risk. This comes from Nicola Davis of The Guardian. A warning to all the new and soon-to-be moms out there: no more doom scrolling. Exposure to light at night increases the risk of pregnant women to develop gestational diabetes. According to the article, gestational diabetes affects 4 to 5 in 100 women during pregnancy, and if left uncontrolled, it could result in health problems for their baby. New research from the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecological Maternal Fetal Medicine, try saying that 10 times fast, indicates that women who ingest greater levels of light just 3 hours before sleep increase their chances of developing diabetes during pregnancy. The driver for this derives from light's ability to suppress melatonin, thereby disrupting the metabolic process, including the regulation of blood sugar levels. While the type of light was not studied, the brightness of the light was, thereby indicating greater propensity to develop gestational diabetes with increasing levels of brightness. The authors noted that in this study was consistent with prior studies for non-pregnant adults who were observed of having impaired energy metabolism and insulin sensitivity with brighter lights. Future studies look to identify whether or not there's any impact on the child's health outcomes. Well, that's something.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's all we need to hear. I actually read today that the International Agency for Cancer Research have labeled a disruption in the human circadian rhythm as a probable carcinogen. What else do we need to hear? That, too much light in the evenings, it's cancerous. We're talking diabetes, headaches, anxiety, depression. There is enough studies and enough evidence that there is a connection here. And it's a shame, but I imagine this can be a catalyst for change. These studies, and of course the babies. We love babies in this country. We have to keep them safe.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. And I guess it kind of goes along with the little plug I did with about my video idea with changing your devices. So at the beginning of talking about this article, you said no more doom scrolling. Well, a pregnant woman might still be sitting there on social media, but, she could change the color temperature of her phone, set night mode on and all that stuff. That would be a very good move to do.
Because this study itself just looked at brightness, right? It didn't look at the actual colors.
Right.
It wasn't looking to say, hey, if we're just using warm lights, are we seeing any of a change in the propensity to actually have gestational diabetes? So saying that the darker the better, stay away from light for 3 hours. I think it'll be really interesting to see that breakdown of the color to see if that actually affects anything.
Yeah, I agree that they should go a little bit more in depth, but the brightness, I can definitely see that. I mean, shift workers that are always under bright lights at night.
Well, it's interesting. You spoke about, Daylon, you spoke about the light levels for night shift workers. I actually, this month in prepping for the show, I came across an article, no lie, you guys are going to love this, that tells you the best way to have your night shift workers sharp and attentive is to make sure everything is pure white light, maximum volume. And the whole time I'm thinking is, this is what creates circadian rhythm problems. This is what creates melatonin issues. This is why everyone, even, your Samsung or your Apple changes to a dark mode after a certain time. These are all the reasons for it. And I don't know if you guys ever worked a night shift. I worked night shift back in college, and we didn't have the lights on full blast. It was like a warm lighting. It was partial lighting. So it wasn't a full lit facility. But at the same time, getting sleep during the day is just hard, because there's nothing your body wants to do when you're driving home and the sun's coming up. Your body does not want to go to sleep. Like, it's just physically, your body just does not want to do it. Right. So to your point, Daylon, I thought that was a really rather sadistic way to control your workers and to get maximum efficiency out of your workers. But what do I know?
You'll get the efficiency for the shift, but over years, how is that impacting that worker's health?
And I wonder if there's burnout too. You increase the burnout of that worker.
You do. And this was just one that I saw just from experiences with family members that work night shifts. We'd go camping all the time, and they'd work the night before, come home, take a quick nap, and then be out and up with us around the campfire at night. And with very little sleep, and then on the day schedule throughout the entire trip, and then back to the night schedule. And it was just brutal watching what was going on.
Yeah, no, it's a very hard gig to do. And, having maximum white light, having a bluish light, I think makes it all that much more difficult. The next article is a little derivation, or I'm sorry, we're driving a different road here. We're not going to talk about enjoying the nighttime cell phone usage as much. So this article comes to us from author Daniel Stables of Telegraph. I spent a weekend in the darkest part of England, and it changed me. Stables ventured up to the most remote part of England, the Keidler Forest, during this time where he spent a few days bathed in night. Stables recounts something of which I'm sure everyone here can relate to. Per Stables, I felt annoyed by the image I had conjured, a fragment of urban life intruding into my solitude like a shard of glass in a cake. I was overthinking, but such is life for the novice night walker. Every rustle of leaves becomes a malevolent companion in the dark. Every glint in a distant puddle, a flashing of eyes. Stables recounts reconnecting with his night vision, mushroom hunting during the daytime, and what sounds like overall curiosity-driven rest. His senses were increased because he didn't rely on his eyes as much. And that's not saying you can't see at night, but I think everyone here, you guys ever experience that? You guys, when I go up Cherry Springs, one of my favorite things to do is walk around away from the actual setup where everyone is. And I just like enjoying the walk at night.
So, yeah, I agree with the Cherry Springs thing. And I get where he was coming from, where everything is increased because, your eyes are a little bit limited on what you can see at night. So all the other senses take over. And you just have to remember that little rustle of leaves could just be a squirrel that's probably, 100 feet away. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But I agree with the walking around that you were talking about, Bill, up at Cherry Springs.
Brendan, how about
walking around in the dark under a dark sky, I think that's an important part of the human experience.
It's interesting. It wasn't the same trip that me and you were up at Cherry Springs, Bill, but it was probably the year before. I was up there for the weekend that the Star Party was supposed to be happening, but COVID kept it closed. And I don't know how many times you've been up there when fog rolls through.
Yeah, not too many times, thankfully.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Because walking around at night with no lights, especially if people are seeing that there are gaps in the fog and the clouds, so they still keep rolling and stay awake. But the people just walking back and forth to the bathroom, it looks kind of like a horror movie. But you got the fog on the ground and like this shadowy figure coming out of the fog, but then you look up and there's this beautiful Milky Way, and it's insane. It's an amazing thing to check out.
Yeah, I think when we think of nighttime, or when anyone thinks of they start getting a little afraid at night, I think it's really driven by that lack of information, right? So like you were saying, in a foggy area, you don't really know what's all around you, and you lack that clear-cut information that you can just be at peace to know that, hey, everything around here is kind of constant, kind of stable. I don't know about you two. Like, I've done a whole bunch of big backpacking trips, and one of the first things you learn, especially as a kid, is that, like, the creature that's going to make the loudest noise is a squirrel or like a chipmunk. But that bear is just going to be quiet. It's not going to come up to you and start, shaking a tree, and, it's not going to make a loud noise until he starts breathing. And then you might have a problem. But the bigger animals, they don't make as much noise. It's the small animals. And, until that goes through your head a few times, I can definitely see the shake that he has there. How the rustle of leaves becomes the villain.
Yeah, on this note of being afraid, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that phenomenon when people lose power, when entire towns lose power, and suddenly the local police force receives hundreds of phone calls that people think that they're being like invaded by aliens or something, because suddenly they can see stars again. Like the actual stars themselves can be scary to people. I think that's super interesting.
Well, so when it comes to the walking around at night, there's, with what we just talked about, there is a little bit of a conscious effort that you have to remember where you are. If you're at a place like Cherry Springs and a star party, you know that you're surrounded by other people that are all doing the same thing you are. But if you're out in a field by yourself getting pictures of the night sky, then maybe familiarize yourself with the location before it gets dark. That way you know it's there. And also know what wildlife might be in the area. You might only have squirrels, depending on where you are in the world, or you might have a few larger animals that might be a little bit leery about coming up to you if you're listening to music, but they'll otherwise leave you alone.
Yeah. Most animals, at least on the East Coast, aren't going to bother you.
Yeah. If one thing to keep in mind is if you're going to be by yourself doing something like astrophotography or stargazing, have a little bit of music playing, because it's not natural to their environment, and they kind of get leery about that and tend to stick away from it. So have music, bring a friend, have a chat.
Stables here, he was kind of doing essentially a night bath. He was kind of immersing himself in that world. And, being someone who loves night, I think I can totally understand what he was doing and his emotions and what he was kind of going through there. So that's kind of cool just to hear. Like, one of the things I love at night is, especially, if you're in a place where you actually have night, is you get to hear the owls, and you get to hear the birds at night, the whippoorwills, and you hear these birds that you don't hear normally because it's, you're in a urban setting, or you have a place where, the nighttime is so curated, like in a suburban setting. Okay, moving on to the environmental and ecological articles we have here. Lights out across the country. Connie Sanchez of Audubon. In case you're not aware, although I'm sure mostly everyone listening is aware, each year the Audubon Society helps guide birds safely across North America by the promotion of their Lights Out campaign. Many cities around the nation share similar tales. Here in Philly, one night alone, we had 1,500 birds killed in October of 2020 when the birds became disoriented by the building lights under heavy cloud conditions. The Lights Out campaign works in 3 parts. First, bird advocacy groups engage with community leaders. Here in Philly, we have an alliance of business and bird advocacy groups that all work together to the best of their abilities, be it in joining forces for Lights Out protocols, bird safe glass, and more. The Audubon also conducts regular surveys to count any birds killed from collisions. And then third, birding and businesses form coalitions to help city government and commerce leaders in how to dim their lights and how to provide bird-safe environments. So there's 3 parts, right? You have your business side, you have your actual numbers side, and then you have the government side. The success of the program, which helps educate property owners on how to turn off, shield, dim unnecessary lighting, has seen a 70% reduction in collisions in one site in Philadelphia. And this is an article that's essentially using Philly as a model, since we have had some successes here in our Lights Out campaign. In fact, and although it still shocks me, even when I consider how bright the city skies have become only in the last few years, Philly is cited as a prime example of how to make a Lights Out campaign work. Lights Out here locally will take place on April 1st through May 31st. Other cities' timeframes will vary due to migration timing. I want to add that be on the lookout for the International Dark Sky Week, as we mentioned before, and that's April 15th through 22nd. Here in Philly, I will be taking over the fine folks of Friends of Wissahick and Instagram feed. Very much looking forward to that. And I know, Daylon, you have stuff coming out on your end. Brendan, you doing anything for International Dark Sky Week?
I'll probably ask my landlord to turn off all the building lights that they keep on continuously. But no, I really would like to put together some awareness while I'm on the streets with the telescope. So, yes, stay tuned.
No, just the video that I mentioned and neat coverage for International Dark Sky Week, and then in that week, if there is a chance, I might join one of the Pittsburgh club members. He does similar programs to what Brendan does up on Mount Washington here in Pittsburgh, and does some outreach and brings his dog and shows whatever is visible that night. Excellent. So might join him for that.
Right. Yeah, well, let's continue a little more on the birds, because this is the time of year when we definitely pay attention to our sky migrations. Animal Astronomers, a bird's eye view of the night sky. James Foster of one of my favorite magazines, Astronomy Magazine. One of my favorite birds to see during migration season is this bright, vibrant blue indigo bunting. I don't know if you guys ever seen one. It's a small songbird. Flies all the way up from Central America. Uses the sun by day and stars by night for navigation. In fact, in a 1967 study, the migration orientation in the indigo bunting, it was found when you block out part of the northern sky from their view, they become disoriented. Follow-up studies confirm that migrating birds have an ability to learn and follow star patterns as navigation points. Utilizing a navigation point such as the North Star provides a more robust approach to navigation than the sun, which may scuttle jet-lagged birds. This article from Astronomy goes on to further illustrate how coincidental placement of certain objects in the sky, take for instance the denser area of the Milky Way, Sagittarius, leads dung beetles to utilize the Milky Way as a guide point. In much the same way that light disorients and confuses birds, a finding that people have known since the very beginning of the 20th century, insects like dung beetles end up being very disoriented, often becoming lost or rolling around in circles when exposed to nighttime light.
I think eventually we're going to connect light pollution to the point where everybody on Earth cares about one of the effects. I mean, the effect it has on us should be enough, but I mean, that beautiful indigo bunting, I mean, come on. We all need more beauty in our lives, and I'm all about the birding cause. Save the birds.
Brendan, do you go birding? Are you a birder?
A friend of mine is trying to get me into it. I mean, I have the optics for it, so yeah, maybe sometime this summer I'll get involved in birding.
Well, this spring is a great time. You're going to see amazing different types of birds stopping by for like a week or two and moving on up. It's a very cool time.
Yeah. When do you do this kind of thing? When can I go out to look for birds?
I would say starting in early April on through June. You just go out. John Hines Preserve down there is great. And then you have over here in Wissahickon, some just Houston Meadow, another great spot. You get some really cool birds.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Thanks for the tips.
Anytime. Daylon.
The things I found interesting on this article was about not only birds, but also like the dung beetles using the stars. It's amazing how creatures, large and small, rely on the night sky for navigation. And to Brendan's point about one day we might have awareness enough to where somebody cares about one of the aspects of it. We start seeing more with insects and the effects there, that'll eventually work its way up into our food chain. So we definitely got to keep an eye on it.
Do you think that, and I know we're going to get to this in a second, I have one more article. Let me get through this article because I want to pose this question to you guys after we get through this article. So dazzling lights are causing ecological chaos, disrupting plants' seasonal rhythms and their fragile relationship with pollinators. This is from Ali Hirschlag of the BBC. Now let's take a look at plants. Plants understand the environment by use of photoreceptors. At least 13 of them are used to identify length of day, helpful for the plant's circadian rhythm, allowing a plant to know when to bloom or drop leaves. About 5 of those photoreceptors are near infrared, which means that plants develop a special functionality to absorb light from the moon and surrounding starlight. Per Brett Seymour in the article, an ecologist and assistant professor of biological sciences at the University of Texas El Paso, plants will get stressed out under artificial light. They can photosynthesize more, and because there's more stress. Seymour compared artificial light on plants to that of a bodybuilder. This is someone always working out. When the plant photosynthesizes, they're taking in energy, and if they're doing that all the time, it can be overwhelming and create a reactive type of oxygen that actually kills the plant. The article goes on to suggest a combination of artificial light paired with climate change, for which here in Philly we saw exactly 1 month plus maybe of winter this year before spring arrived in the first week of February, where the trees were extended well past their natural rhythm. The climate change, artificial light ultimately weakens the plant structures. The article cites that bud bursts occur 7.5 days earlier in light polluted areas than darker locations. So I'm curious for you guys on this one. Is it going to be that we actually start respecting the needs of the ecology, or are we just going to, is the ecology that survives going to be catered to our level of existence?
I'm hoping it's the former. I mean, the silver lining when it comes to light pollution is it's one of the few environmental effects that can just be reversed, just like that. The damage that we're causing, doesn't have to be long lasting. But as all ecosystems around the world adapt over time, I think my hope is that they will bounce back once we turn the lights off. And now more so than ever, I am confident that we will turn those lights off, and we will be able to reap the benefits of such an act.
I agree with the first point there that Brendan mentioned about hopefully it's the former side of it, but we will end up seeing some that do eventually over time adapt. It's just the way that evolution is, that they deal with what's around them, whether it's a plant or an animal. With the plant thing, though, I can't get the picture out of my head of a plant that's built like the Rock with the bodybuilding thing. I can't get it out of my head now. But I have noticed where at the end there you mentioned the 7.5 days earlier in light polluted areas than other darker locations. I did kind of notice that a little bit last year. Around this time of year, I tend to go camping with friends, and the trees were already starting to bud in town. But when we got out to our campsite, they weren't budding yet. So I did kind of notice that it is affecting these trees and other plants.
I would assume, Daylon, that is coming from the actual specific fixtures, right? So if you are using a 5,000K, maybe even 4,000K fixture over top of or right around a whole bunch of new plantings, that will probably affect those trees, I'm thinking.
I would believe so, yeah. Because just like animals, plants have a circadian rhythm too. And with them budding earlier, The one thing that I'm waiting to see is how at the one spot there said it ultimately weakens the plant. And I'm wondering if some of these decorative trees that are planted all around cities across the world, if, like the nasty wind that I just had here in Pittsburgh yesterday, if these trees are going to be more susceptible to being knocked over by those winds because they aren't getting the proper amount of dark that they need to strengthen up.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there probably needs to be more research. And I haven't seen many articles come across on plants, at least in the short time I've been doing the show. I think there needs to be more research to discern, to take away some other variables that are included in plants and lights. And this is, we look at climate change, obviously, is having a tremendous effect on plant life. Because, trees really don't have a down cycle as much. Like I said, we had about a month and maybe a month of winter here in Philly. And then February hit and it was springtime. It wasn't getting the springtime. We went straight to spring. We were, in the 60s and right away. We had no snow. This is probably the warmest winter Philly's ever had, actually. How do you discern out some of those variables? And I'm curious. I want to see future studies that can actually prove to me if light is actually this big variable involved with plant life.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see if some researchers are willing to take that on. And
I don't know how you discern that out, though, right? How do you control for that?
The first step would probably be to create a controlled environment. Maybe if there is a new building going up and they want to put some decorative trees around, put those out there. But at the same time, start your research and get the same type of tree and all that. Put them in a controlled environment where they have less light at night or more, depending on how you want the study to go. When you have control of at least one of it, but you look at the comparison to the one live out there in the new build over time, you can see what the differences are.
Yeah, because on the Burt side, this is very clear. This is something that's been Audubon has a lot of data, and this is why they do the depth count around buildings, especially, like you have the added bonus that a lot of cities here included are going up all glass structures, right? Which is essentially akin to a killing field during the daytime for birds, much less if you have light, then you have LED lights on the side of the buildings and whatnot. They can count. There's quantitative evidence about light killing birds. It's quantitative. But for some of these other creatures, their research needs, in my mind, the research really needs to come up. And maybe I'm missing some research here that I don't know about. I probably am. I don't know everything here. So I'm probably missing some big ones. But I'd be curious.
I'm definitely curious, especially when it comes to agriculture. Is there like a nutritional deficit from farms, from produce coming out of farms that have a lot of light pollution versus farms that are in the middle of nowhere and have very minimal artificial lighting? That would be a study that I would be really interested to learn about.
Yeah, and for plants, I guess the best way to do it would be, if you have your control plus one that's out in the wild, I guess you could say, see what the size difference. Did the plant grow differently? If it is one that buds and, it maybe drops fruit or flowers, is there a difference in number? One thing that they can measure is the density of the wood. If it's, say, a tree, maybe light is making it less dense or more dense or something. There are a couple different ways they could look at it.
I think we investigated this point to a firm stopping point. So let's move on to, I know, Daylon, you're going to love this article. This is one that I saw and I had to definitely include. It happened to me the other day. Lights off, danger on. What to know about the latest dangerous driving trend. If that's not a sensationalist news title, I don't know what is. It comes from Click on Detroit. Now, here's something that's scary. And it honestly happened to me the other day. It was about 10:30 at night. I went down to the airport to pick up my wife. I was a bit tired, and I pulled into the waiting lot. We're just hanging out till her plane landed. It was raining. It was that Thursday, right? Fred, I don't know if you remember, like it was crazy lightning and it rained and it's raining pretty heavily. And when I went to restart the car, the storm had passed and I I couldn't figure out why my dashboard dimmer wasn't working. And I'm going through, the airport, going to the baggage, trying to pick her up. And I thought maybe it was something to do with my car because I had to drive through a lake to actually get to the airport. There was, of course, one of these great I-95 ramps that has like a lake in front of it. Maybe it was just a tweak. Sometimes sensors just get kind of crazy with a lot of water. It wasn't until I got on the road, we're leaving for the airport down I-95, when Caitlin looked over at me and said, "Babe, you don't have your headlights on." And I was like, oh, I need to put those on. That's why this dimmer hasn't been working. Per the Winnedot Deputy Police Chief, Archie Hamilton, the numbers of no-light drivers over the last couple of years has noticeably increased. There aren't many drivers out there this hasn't happened to. Yeah, it just happened to me the other day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. That's one that I definitely, I agree with you there. So a little request for the listeners out there. If you happen to have a dash cam and you see somebody driving without your headlights, take a clip. And then I'm trying to put together a video of just the dash cam or drivers without headlights, just to show that, hey, this area might be a little bit too bright. And you can send that to dashcam@idapgh.org. But with your point about the dashboard lights not coming on, this is a discussion I had with somebody at work, that they noticed that there's a new trend now where older cars, when you started driving, you didn't have your lights on your dashboard unless your headlights were on. Now with the new LCDs and all that stuff, they're always on, and you can't tell whether or not your headlights are on without the little indicator. So I would love to see some kind of legislation come into play where the sensors that are currently working for daytime running lights sense that, hey, it's dark, but your headlights aren't on, put up an alert. That way the driver knows, hey, my headlights aren't on and it is dark. That would be one way to mitigate it. But the easiest way would be design dashboards to where that the lights come on when the headlights come on. Just like, the old, just like the cars from the 70s through the 90s.
I have a car from 2015. It's old, but I mean, it's not that old. What I always thought was, I just didn't realize that it was, the lights weren't on because it was so bright outside. And that's right. Part of it, right? Doesn't that play into it? Like when I was driving down the road, leaving the airport, it never dawned on me that the lights couldn't be on because I was like, no, why would I not turn the lights on? And you don't need to notice it because it's like sunshine at 10:30 at night when you're driving through the city.
Yep, I get that. And I live close to both of the stadiums in Pittsburgh, so I drive by them almost every day. And usually around middle of winter, when my commute home is at night because of the timing of the sunset, I see a lot of people near the stadiums that don't turn on their lights.
They just don't notice.
It's bright there.
Yeah, they just don't know. Yeah, something's got to be said.
Yeah, I see this in Center City all the time. Last night, the night before that, walking down the street at night, and it's incredibly bright in my neighborhood. I'm in Queen Village. But I had this problem back when I used to drive in the city. But I had to realize that people, like, I need to have my lights on so people can see me, not so I can see. But it's scary when you're crossing the street and like you hear something coming, but like you're not seeing the lights. Daylon, I liked your idea of having some kind of like, alert to remind people.
It's totally possible with the way sensors are these days. They sense. So my car, I have a 2021 Corolla, and the auto setting actually turns on the headlights now when it's dark. They could use that same sensor technology to alert the driver that, hey, your headlights aren't on. It's a simple fix.
So per the article, as of September 21st, the Canadian vehicle lighting requirements will include headlights, taillights, and side marker lights that automatically come on in the dark. So manufacturers are going to have to sell to that specification in Canada. I don't know if that's going to hold over to the U.S., but that is something that the Canadian government has instituted to kind of remedy this situation as well.
I think it would benefit manufacturers if one country says, hey, just turn them on when it gets dark, then just put every line that you put out for all countries instead of catering to just one country. If it, I think it would be better there.
Yeah, I would assume that if it's being sold in Canada, it's probably being sold in the U.S.
Right.
That's my thought. The only thing they would have to change is probably maybe there's some emissions thing in the dashboard, right?
Right.
But I don't know. I don't know the industry.
And whether it's primarily miles or kilometers an hour.
Right. Moving on, we have some quick hits here. Astronomers stumble in diplomatic push to protect the night sky. Daniel Cleary of Science. Diplomatic bureaucracy is blamed for some serious setbacks for astronomers in the UN in the past month. Since 2019, visual and radio astronomy has been heavily impacted by the commercialization of the LEO low Earth orbit communication mega constellations. On the visual end, light streaks from satellites that often get as dim as a few magnitudes at best, disrupt and create significant noise in data. International Astronomical Union work in Vienna appears to be bogged down by nuances in how individual nations want to implement any guidelines. The Smithsonian exhibit that is pretty cool. I know Diane Turnshek, one of the Pittsburgh IDA folk, was interviewed on this. And Smithsonian exhibition invites visitors to help recover their fading night sky. This is cool. So next time you're down in DC, check this out. This is going to take place at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. It is currently an exhibit going on right now. Lights Out, Recovering the Night Sky runs through April of 2025. So you don't have to rush down there today, but maybe, next time you're down in the next 2 years. The exhibit touches on the history of lighting, light pollution, dark side of light, who needs dark, and then has a series of interactive engagement on the dark sky for individuals who are at the exhibit. I should note that this is something that I know we're part of. People in the dark sky community are very excited about. I don't know if you guys know any information on this. I just know about the actual exhibit taking place and from items what I heard, but that sounds like a really curious exhibit for educating the public. I don't know. Do you guys feel like these exhibits work?
I think any outreach has an important effect. Now here's the thing, like there's the visible light that these satellites can give off, that, steal the show from the universe. But then there's the invisible light that uniquely affects astrophotographers. Those that utilize non-visible wavelengths. But yeah, the thing is, most humans live in light polluted cities, where these satellites are really not always visible anyway. So yeah, anything that gets the word out about what's happening outside of the cities, I think is really important. But I would love to see that exhibit at the Smithsonian. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, I think these exhibits do help. And the reason I say that is because I did volunteer at the Carnegie Science Center here in Pittsburgh for a while. And some of the programs that they ran, that they still run today, typically when somebody comes through that wasn't thinking about light pollution when it was brought up, they were like, So for the DC area, I lived in DC for 8 years in that area and been through a lot of the museums there. And it's an interesting one to get added to the plate because you go through the DC area and you get a lot of the history of the U.S., the National Archives and all that. But then this one is kind of out of the blue, and visitors to the Smithsonian will kind of get a little bit of a head scratch and hopefully come out learning something.
Hopefully, right?
That's what I'm hoping.
Well, I'm playing devil's advocate here because I think it needs to be asked. There's a big push, there's been a big push now for a while on using natural plants and not trying to over fertilize your trees and stuff. But I haven't seen many landscapers and consumers pick up that trend, like pick up any of that push at all. I haven't seen that take off. I feel like something like this is something people will go into, they'll look at, they'll say, oh yeah, that is an issue. And I'm like, what do you want me to do about it? And I go back home and be like, well, we need this light. And I don't really care about this light as much. It's not affecting me. Just leave it on all night. What do you think? Like, is this something that is actually going to persuade people? Or is Brendan, or for you and Daylon and Brendan, you guys, when you guys go out and actually engage with people and actually show them stars and actually show them the effect, there's a 1-to-1 correlation between what they're seeing and then the lighting around them. I feel like that would be more impactful than doing an exhibit like this. Prove me wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong here. I want to be wrong.
Well, I kind of want to prove you right, actually. Look, the type of people that go to museums are like, they're looking for an educational experience. Usually. Now the type of person walking down the street is not. Okay, so to prove you wrong, people go to museums with that mentality, like, I'm here to learn something. I'm here to see and touch and hear and all that. So that's where the real value is, by putting an educational piece where people go to find it. So I think that's the best argument I've got to prove you wrong. But like I said earlier, I think getting real meaningful change when it comes to light pollution is going to be a matter of getting the average person invested in this issue. And that partially has to take place where the people are.
Yeah, I think just having that exhibit there is just a good thing in general, because they wouldn't be educated on it otherwise.
Daylon, is it going to be you and me that go down? Is it going to be people who are already in the know? Or is it going to be actual people who have never heard of this? That's my question. Is this exhibit preaching to the choir? If I look at it, if I'm down there, I'm like, oh, I already know everything about light pollution. I don't need to see this. Like, I'd much rather go to this other museum.
Well, a lot of people go to the Natural History Museum for other things. Like, sure, they go there for the feature exhibit, which this one would be considered one, but they go there for the other stuff too. You know, they go for the history of Native Americans. They go there for animal history, whatever is in the building that year. So I would say, and don't get me wrong, they're not going to just say light pollution only. They're going to still have other stuff for people to get their fix on. And I think that those people going in there for, say, the Native American history, they look over and they see this nighttime stuff. I think it'll help, because it wouldn't be brought up to them otherwise unless they ran into Brandon out on the street or came to a star party.
When we look at a way to get the average person interested in, or to awaken the average person to the impacts of light pollution, is it better to use the stars, or is it better to use something like a bird as an example of the impact that it's having on us?
It's kind of hard to say that one or the other would be more impactful, because, like, as humans, right, we have this like instinctual understanding of the sky, of the clouds, of the rain, of the dog and the cat and the bird and the grass, you know, like that's like just programmed in our minds. Now we still have birds. Like, there's a bird outside my window that's actually quite pleasant. But when it comes to the stars, we're at this point where, like, generationally, like I've never seen a dark sky my entire life. I was born in the 90s in a very light polluted place. Now my parents, on the other hand, you know, there were 10 times as many stars when they were kids as there are now. And, you know, that generation might be the last generation to even remember what it was like. So it's now, when it comes to the stars, it's becoming this matter of reminding people of something that they've actually never seen. From my experience, when I offer somebody a view of what is beyond our planet, there's like this epiphany that's happening, like that, like, oh yeah, we're on a planet right now. So I think that existential side of it is extremely important. But like, how do you recreate that epiphany, that reminder that we're on a planet at a larger scale than just one at a time? And I think if that solution can be found, then maybe we're onto something here.
Daylon, do you have any thoughts?
No, he summed it up pretty well.
Okay.
I think we're on the right path.
Thank you.
Well, Brendan, on that point, at what stage do we just stop caring about the stars? Like, what stage does it become, hey, we expect the sky to be always moving because we have 1.5 billion satellites up there. We expect you not to be able to see anything but satellites because they're probably going to be the brightest things you see even in the city. At what point does that just become the human experience, and then we totally forget about all the other things, like other pieces of human history where it was commonplace, and it has just faded away because modernity has moved us in a different direction?
All right, here's what I would say about that. The night sky, you could argue that it's the first thing we ever had. Like, before we had technology, before we had anything as humans, like, we had the night sky. We used it to navigate. We based all of our religions off of it. It's something that has been in the zeitgeist of the human experience forever. And it's only this like tiny little piece of human history that it's been kind of taken away from us. So I'm inclined to believe that our connection to the universe will always be part of our human programming. And then it can never truly be lost. And it really will always be a matter of like unlocking that part of us. So yeah, I am an optimist when it comes to keeping that in our lives long term.
All right, let's move on and try and push through some of these remaining articles here. To protect against wildlife from artificial light, look to the moon. Now, here's something that is pretty neat and it fits into what we were talking about above. There's a proposed design for a Danish church, which looks to automatically adjust the building's exterior lighting based on the abundance of moonlight. This comes to us from the island of Anholt, which sits between Danish mainland and Sweden. Per the article, as Anholt's town, 45 streetlights receded into the distance, moonless shadows reached out to embrace the dunes. Rathsach looked up, admiring the Milky Way stretching across the sky. Thousands of stars shone down. Your senses heighten, and you hear the water and feel the fresh air. Let that sink in for a second. In the town of Anholt, there's a church which is a common meeting place for the actual community itself, which now will be lit according to the phase of the moon, whereby the warm path lighting, down-shining facade lighting, will light up the church when the moon goes down. It's an interesting and natural way to think about lighting. Harvesting the moon's natural glow to light the building's exterior rather than using artificial glow, that's a very interesting approach to your exterior lighting.
Yeah, it sounds very artistic to me. Like trying to recreate that moon glow. I love it.
It's different.
There's something about the moon glow, right? Like you guys, well, Daylon, you probably have seen this, and Brendan. Unfortunately, I feel bad that you haven't seen a dark sky yet. Hopefully this summer you can get up to Cherry Springs or get somewhere where there is the Milky Way. For when I was growing up, I grew up in rural parts of Pennsylvania, and the full moon was a really cool time because you look outside and it was like you could see everything, and it was practically daytime, right? Your eyes had adapted, but it was so bright that you could see. It was just so cool to be outside in the full moon. Like you could do stuff. You could literally have no problem. You didn't have to be. You could identify everything, and so. I think it's a really interesting approach. It's very artistic. I like that. Artistic. That's good.
Yeah, it is. It is nifty. my recent video about the Skywatcher Star Adventure, the little bit of clips in there where I'm setting it up out in the field. That night, we were at Mingo Observatory, just south of Pittsburgh, and it was early stages in the moon phase to where the moon was visible for, I want to say, 2.5 hours after dark. And then after it set, it was just crazy how different it was. Because when you first were out there after dark with the moon up, you were able to see everything without needing to turn on a red light at all. But after it was down, if you needed to adjust something or watch your gear, then you needed to turn on a light. It was pretty cool. And with the way that this church is handling it, I think it's a nice approach. It's a little bit different than maybe some other communities should look at.
Do you think this would be a great approach for any kind of dark sky location, right? Like you're kind of harvesting the moonlight to supplement any of the artificial light that you'll be using. So especially, you think of like any islands that may be dark sky friendly and such.
For pathway lighting and stuff like that, sure. Because you don't need it when it's a full moon, but
yeah, it's good to know for that town. If you look at the pictures of the area, this around the church, it does use very warm lights, and they're all actually very responsibly placed, very responsibly angled.
Right, that's good.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to quickly push through these two articles here, and then we will get to finishing up the show. So let's wrap up the regular news section with some fun articles. Turn up the lights. What to do in dark sky destinations during the daytime. Elizabeth Yoku of Road Trippers. I don't know if you guys are anything like me, but when I go to dark sky site, it's part night and it's also one part love of nature. Yoku details daytime activities in 5 great dark sky sites. So when you go out and visit, you can learn about doing anything from multi-pitch sport climbing at Smith Rock to visiting Ghost Town, Lowell, Arizona. I know in Cherry Springs, people like to do the ice caves and, Kinzua Bridge. You got some really cool stuff. That's half of it, right? Like half of it's going to these cool destinations and being able to see not just the Milky Way at night, and then you have some interesting stuff you don't see all the time during the day. So that's one of the things I always loved. And then also Ramadan just started, and maybe you could be part of the UAE's moon sighting committee. This I didn't know about this, and unfortunately that's probably because I'm Christian and living in the U.S. Ramadan UAE Moon Sighting Committee to search for skies on Tuesday. National news. Leave it to religion to always remind us of our connection with the night sky. Ramadan, the Islamic month of fasting and spirituality, officially begins once the 1,000-year-old tradition of the Moon Sighting Committee convenes after sunset to confirm the appearance of the crescent moon. The crescent moon, being a religious symbol most associated with Islam, often hangs outside of homes, shines through lanterns, and sits in the packaging of sweets for friends and family. Very cool stuff. Very good to see that. We always have that connection that we it's there. We just don't, I guess, visually or mentally think about that direct connection we have with the nighttime. Like you were saying before, Brendan, right? Saying like that's part of humanity.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure every religion out there has some connection or another to the planets, the moon, the constellations of the zodiac. Even they say, because I was also brought up in the Christian religion, Catholicism, and they say that even the story of, not to be sacrilegious here, but they say the story of Jesus Christ is actually just an interpretation of the winter solstice. When the sun appears to die for 3 days at its lowest point in the sky, before, of course, rising up again.
Oh, very interesting. That's something I never heard. That's a very interesting take on it. I'll have all the hate mail sent to you, Brendan, and
yes. Well, yes. Please. I'll field that. It's just a fun interpretation from the astronomy angle.
It's a very interesting thought, right? Yeah, that is very. It is funny when you look at it with different glasses. and you can actually make out some of those connections. So, all right, this has been such a great show so far, guys. I really appreciate really appreciate having you guys on. You guys have made this an excellent hour. This is going to be the longest show I've ever done so far, and this has just been a blast. So, first off, I want to remind folks, because we're going to finish up here in just a little bit. We have our Afraid of the Dark segment coming up, and then we also have our research article of the month. But just as a reminder, you can find anything we talk about today over at lightpollutionnews.com. And you can find this breakdown over at Reddit or Light Pollution News. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you review your podcast. We're close to the end, folks. Don't leave us yet, because it's that time of the month where we get to investigate humanity's ongoing, often irrational phobia of the night. It's afraid of the dark. And this month, we have a lot. We have a doozy. So I'm going to start this one off. Here we go. We want them fixed. A group calls attention to streetlight outages in Northwest D.C. Walter Morris of NBC Washington. File this one under "We're scared and we just want some control" section of the Light Pollution Cabinet. A D.C. nonprofit, the Downtown Cluster of Congregations, is calling on D.C. to fix streetlights near Northwest D.C.'s busiest nightlife areas. We want these fixed. We want them fixed now, and we can't wait, Terry Lynch, the executive director, said a week prior to finding a streetlight out just a few feet from that streetlight. 2 adults were shot, one fatally, on V Street in Northwest D.C. In response to an uptick in crime, Mayor Muriel Bowser is increasing the police presence in Adams Morgan, a section of the city. However, this isn't good enough for Lynch, who appears to firmly believe that lighting is a silver bullet that will prevent all crime. A task force is great, but we need pedal to the metal. We need urgency, and we need to see results. If that isn't panic-induced dementia, I'm not quite sure what is. In a related news, just yesterday, and we're recording this on March 26th, it appears that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law HB 837. HB 837, for those of you not aware, as many of I was not aware until recently, is a tort reform bill designed per NBC Miami to protect businesses, property owners, and corporations from paying excessive damages in lawsuits. The bill, which has many vocal advocates and critics, appears to codify our friend Terry Lynch's unsubstantiated mindset in a law. In the new Florida legislation, an apartment building owner cannot be sued provided he or she implement the following measures: has a working security camera, a parking lot with an average 1.8 foot candle per square foot at 18 inches or above light surface lit all night, and then, of course, lighting on all walkways, porches all night. There are additional stipulations. However, these were 2 of the first 3 paragraphs explicitly confirm a legalistic connection between lighting and safety. The crew over at the Restoring Darkness podcast had a great episode last week on this topic. I'm not sure if you guys listen to Restoring Darkness. It's definitely a great podcast on the issues of nighttime and outdoor lighting. The host, Michael Colligan, believes that lighting is a straw man. While people such as Lynch always are quick to correlate lighting with absolute protection from crime, it's never incumbent for lighting installers to prove that their lights actually negatively impact crime. An idea that they raised is a methodology of crime studies appears to influence the results. For instance, we can break down the overall crime studies into 2 categories, quantitative and qualitative. The quantitative studies collect data from police reports and compare data pre- and post-lighting installation, while the qualitative studies have researchers who go out and interview folks before and after in areas for a planned lighting installation. The latter study tends to perceive feelings over numbers. In a most recent episode, Roland Duchesne of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada posited that the qualitative crime studies almost universally conclude that lighting has a positive impact on safety, while the quantitative studies show the complete opposite, that lighting can actually serve to expand crime into the wee hours. At the end of the day, the question really should be asked, who does the lighting serve? Just because you think it aids the good guys doesn't mean it can't aid the bad guys. If no one is around and the area is lit up, who is that serving?
Yeah. So one thing that lawmakers need to remember is that criminals need to see too. If an area is lit up, then the criminal knows exactly where to go to avoid cameras and find shadows to dip into. But if the entire place is dark and it's put on motion sensors and using cameras, then they have to use flashlights, and that can kind of create a little bit of a red flag for the neighbors that something's going on that isn't supposed to be going on. So for that question there, who does the light serve? Sometimes it's the bad guy.
I think the piece here that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and maybe you guys can help me out here, is, okay, so we had 2 adults that were shot in an area where a street light was out. Were there no other lights around?
Given it's the DC area, probably.
So there were other lights around. Is that what you're saying, Daylon?
More than likely. I mean, having lived there for quite some time, it's pretty much like the Philly area with how bright it is. So even if it was just ambient light from nearby buildings, the one street light out shouldn't have had a correlation to why this crime happened.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous. Like, that was so sensationalized, like just feet away from a downed street light. Like, yeah. So the street light is responsible for the murder then. Yeah, I thought that was ridiculous. And Daylon, I liked your point, that the criminals need that light too. I think for anyone to speculate that a violent act would not have happened had that light been working, it's, absolutely ludicrous. I just don't, I know people feel safer at night when there's more lighting. Like, I know that people feel that way, but I don't believe there's ever been any substantiated connection between light and safety.
Right. And I don't have the studies here to back up Roland Chesney's argument here, but that's what he's saying. He's saying that people feel safer with the light, but the numbers don't necessarily back it up. So now we have legislation in Florida coming into effect that essentially codifies and says, hey, you have to have light and you have to have each section of your building lit up, because if you don't, you can be liable because you are allowing victimization to happen.
Yeah. That's a bit ridiculous.
I heard it. Totally ridiculous.
To me, when I look at the crime stats here in Philadelphia, you can see different crimes happen different times in different places. And many of these crimes are crimes of, just convenience, right? And when you have you have to watch yourself, right, Brendan, when you're in Rittenhouse, right? Is it 100% safe in Rittenhouse?
No.
Yeah, right. You're still in the city, right? You still have to pay attention to where you're at.
Right. There's opportunists and there are professional criminals, whether it's like violence or theft. And the thing is, darkness is not going to dissuade or encourage either. That's just my opinion.
It absolutely does not dissuade them. There is a channel that I recommend people check out. Larry Lawton. He was a big jewel thief up and down the East Coast of the U.S. and he did his time. He got caught and did his time, but then he's been flipping to the other side of the law and helping businesses with their security. And he did a short series where he would go and audit the store and essentially just say, I'm going to rob you. And then he'd go through and do it. And then the next day say, here's some of the points. And there are a few videos where it isn't like a main talking point, but he's like, these lights let me know exactly where to hide. And it's pretty interesting series to watch. So lighting does not deter them. It lets them know, like I said, where to duck and hide. And,
Daylon,
around.
What if you have uniformity in lighting and there's no place to hide?
It could dissuade, but crimes of opportunity where it's just a hit and run, I don't think it'll stop them, because there's a lot of crimes of opportunity that happen in broad daylight.
It's a curious question. What makes people feel safe, and how do you balance that out with not overlighting an area? We have a neighbor up the street that lights their place up like it's definitely, like a maximum security prison. And I don't think they're any more safe than if they didn't do that. Does that deter anyone? Does that fully lit? I mean, we're talking like stadium lighting around your house. Would you say, is that deterring? Is that making an impact? I'm asking because I have my thoughts, but I don't know. I don't know.
I don't think it would. And to be honest, those people would instead, if it's a professional, they would watch the tenant of that house and try to do something when they're not there, just so they don't have to deal with somebody inside.
Different crimes at different times.
Yeah.
I think pop culture might have played a role in all of this, like TV and film, like darkness. That's my thought on it, like the dark alleyways as depicted in visual media. I think that could have something to do with it.
Terry Lynch definitely thinks the lack of lights is the cause of all the crime in Northwest DC.
I would actually agree with that. Just remembering the Home Alone, well, with what Brendan was saying with pop culture, with the Home Alone series, every time that the bandits are trying to come in, it's dark. They don't do anything during the day. So, except for scouting, they scout during the day, but they don't actually perform the crimes until night. And then you see Macaulay Culkin say, "Nah, you ain't getting in the house." But still, other movies and TV shows do depict a lot of scenes is sensationalizing it a little bit too much.
Do you think that these crimes don't happen at night? Do you think that people wouldn't break into an empty house at night?
They absolutely would if they saw the opportunity.
Do you think that having outdoor lighting in that empty house would, if people are casing the place, would they wait till night and then go to a place that's darker than with more light?
If they go somewhere darker, they're going to need to bring a flashlight, which again would let the neighbors know something's happening. But that's also dependent on how attentive the neighbors are. So it's a gray area.
I think we get get tripped up on a lot of these crime studies because everyone is looking for silver bullets and big boxes, right? And when you do any kind of study, you need to get down into nitty gritty. And there are certain crimes that probably benefit from lighting. You look at cars that are broken into, you park underneath a street light, you have something out, people see it, they're going to take it. I think there are probably crimes that benefit from that don't benefit from lighting, that are turned off, that might be scared away. Maybe if you have motion sensor, maybe that might be able to provide some kind of a stimulus enough that might scare someone off. I'm not sure. I don't think, my personal thought is that just lighting alone doesn't do anything because we're so adapted, we're so ingrained with light that it doesn't do it. Like, you're just used to it. Like, everyone sees it. No one's going to notice anyone walking around in a light because there's so much light.
Agreed. Yeah. And it's the contrast of it again. The brighter one area is the darker, the others. So.
All right, let's finish up today's show with the research article of the month. Keeping in line with the bird theme this month, a recent study published in Nature, effects of light and noise pollution on avian communities in European cities are correlated with the species diet. This suggests that birds who rely on food sources other than seeds are most negatively impacted by light at night. The study took place in 14 European cities, identifying 127 different bird species, including the 5 most common species: the house sparrow, blackbird, common swift, great tit, and Eurasian collared dove. Light pollution, it appears, greatly impacts the birds who were insectivores or omnivores, but doesn't really seem to do much for the granivores, the seed-eating birds. The study found that even though artificial light at night can be a boon for some bird species, the overall impact from light leads to a reduction in the insect species and abundance, thereby leading to an overall decline in insects. To put in layman's terms, essentially the birds devour the insects faster than they're able to reproduce, and they stress the population of the insects. If you're wondering what birds around the U.S. favor insects over seeds, look no further than your woodpeckers, flycatchers, and swallows, whereby your juncos, goldfinches, warblers, and mourning doves all tend to go for seeds. Some interesting stuff there on the effects of, down the food chain.
Totally. Just like any type of pollution, light pollution can have devastating impacts on the ecosystems, everywhere. Bugs, I don't think a lot of people have empathy for the bug populations. But again, if you follow that food chain, I hope maybe there's some technology that will come about at some point, like the moth-proof light or something like that. I don't know, just a silly thought.
Yeah, I would agree that with Brendan that a lot of people don't have empathy for the insect population, but they are important because of what they do in nature. I'm not a big fan of getting stung by a bee, but I know they're important to pollinate the flowers and that pollinate food that we eat. Not a big fan of spiders, but they keep certain things in check that would otherwise disrupt the food chain. So they have their place. And if lighting is affecting them in any way, then that is a huge problem.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, we have been recording now for 2 hours, which breaks a record in my book. I don't know if it breaks a record in your book, Daylon, but it definitely breaks a record in my book. So I think it's about time we start wrapping up the show. How's that sound, everyone?
Yeah.
I wish
it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, no, Brendan, definitely. I wish to extend a great thank you to you at home who are listening to another episode, hopefully a great episode, we'll see. But thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Daylon. I want to give you guys an opportunity to tell people where they can find you, how they can connect with you guys. Brendan?
Okay, I'll go first. phillymoonmen.org. You can learn all about our grassroots astronomy outreach programs. And of course, Instagram at Philly Moonmen to keep up with what activities we'll be involved in, where we will be doing sidewalk astronomy. And all spring and summer long, I'll be offering views of the heavens to the passerby on South Street. So I'd love to see each and every one of you down there at some point.
Brendan, is there any particular day that you do it? Is there a fixed day? Or
typically, the rule of thumb I typically go by is if you can see the moon, I am probably on South Street sharing an up-close view of it.
Excellent.
So you can find me on my YouTube channel. It's Astro Escape. And also Twitter and Instagram are both Astro_Escape. I do need to use the Twitter and the Instagram a little bit more often, but primarily definitely the YouTube channel. And I do have a Discord server. So if you are a Discord user, go to my YouTube channel. There's a link there that you can join the server.
Oh, great. It's been a real pleasure having you guys. Thank you so much for coming on the show, guys. It's been a great time. I've had a fun time. Hopefully you guys have had a fun time. I'd love to do this again. So if you're down for that down the road, let's reconnect. As a reminder, we record this show once a month and expect for it to come out in the first 2 weeks of each month. This month, we were probably a little behind. That's probably because we have a lot of editing to do. But usually it's the first 2 weeks of the month. Please reach out with any comments, curiosities, anything else. You can reach out to me at bill@lightpollutionnews.com. Join our mailing list over at Light Pollution News. We have a Reddit, as you can see. Find our Reddit at r Light Pollution News. And of course, we have these articles and much more over at our website in our show notes at lightpollutionnews.com. Thank you once again. We're very excited to put this show together every month. It does take a lot of time and effort, not only to coordinate the guests, but to aggregate the articles, to build the show, to edit it down. So please go out there now, wherever you find your podcast, and give us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it. It truly helps us with the algorithms on the show. Thank you, and remember to only shine the light where it's needed. Be well, everyone.